everyone, and welcome back for our last session of the day for Adobe MAX 2023. And as you can see, I'm here with the wonderful Jeremy Lord. How are you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's very good. We are honoured to have you, as always. And we're going to talk about illustration.
We are, yeah.
But from a different perspective. Time.
So we've got a bit of a shorter time frame. So normally what we would do on these sessions is I would show like how I do the illustration. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about once the illustration is done, what then? How do you showcase it? How do you kind of put it into your portfolio and kind of put it on its best foot?
Fantastic. And before we do that, I'm just going to refresh the chat. And if you have any questions for us today for Jeremy, just post them there and we'll do our best to answer them. And also before we start, Jeremy, do you want to give like a elevator pitch one-liner for what you do?
I usually get someone else to write these things for me. But so my name is Jeremy Lord. I am a freelance illustrator. I love all things cyberpunk, 80s, neon, anime, kind of a mishmash of a whole bunch of different things. You will see a little bit of that today in the designs and illustrations that I've prepared for this particular presentation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Don't even need no one to write it anymore. You've got it. After all this time, you've got it now.
I've copied other people.
But without further ado, I think everything's set up. You can see all your comments. Let's head to the computer.
Yeah, so let me jump in straight into Illustrator here. So normally I would be doing the bulk of my work in terms of actual illustration in Photoshop. That's generally where I tend to just kind of draw digitally, everything else. And so my kind of talks and demos kind of focus in on around that. But I wanted to talk about a new feature in Illustrator, which is the mockup feature. Which is actually super handy and pretty cool and pretty powerful for mocking up your work. And mocking up your work, I think, is a big part of presenting your work well and giving your work context. And I'll talk a little bit about that and clarify what that means a little bit later. But what you're seeing on screen basically is just a little illustration that I did to kind of mess around. There was no real brief here aside from the fact that it's just kind of echoing this kind of like Dara Madol Japanese themes, which is very much kind of where my illustration tends to center around. And what I see a lot of kind of students do and kind of post-grad students is they will do something like this and then just put that as is, like that will literally just be the page that you're seeing on screen will be what goes in. And it's just kind of like, cool, it's a nice illustration. But there's no context to it. And I think that's one of the key factors that is missing from, I think, a lot of post-grad portfolios is this sense of like, where's the brief? Where's the context behind this? And rather than kind of rely on the people seeing this to make sense of like, hey, I could see where this could be used. I could use it on this, or I could use it for this kind of brand. Maybe show them. And I think the other thing that this does is you'll see I've prepared a bunch of pages here that I'll talk through in a little second. We'll do some mock-ups of this artwork. But what happens is a lot of students always have this kind of worry of when they first graduated and they're kind of putting together their first portfolio of like, I don't have enough work in my portfolio. I don't have enough pages. How many pages is enough? Too much? Too little? And they often get this kind of response from a lot of teachers, myself included, of like, quality over quantity.
Absolutely,
and sure, but then at the same time they're worried. It's like, but I only really have 2 pieces that I really like. Exactly. And so what this does is it takes your illustration from just being a one piece to being a project where you've got context, you've got a brief that maybe you wrote for yourself, even if you wrote it for yourself after the fact, right?
Absolutely.
So a bit of post-rationalization, which is definitely what's happened here. I made this work and then go, what could I use this on? How could I make this look like it was for something? And so, now we've got this like portfolio piece that's, maybe like 7 or 8 pages long rather than just one. So you could have literally like 3 pieces in your portfolio, but have a 24-page portfolio, which is a very healthy portfolio to have. So let's get stuck into this. I've got my mock-up window open just over here, and you can see that Illustrator's kind of offering me a few things that are preloaded into it. So we've got some envelopes, some business cards, some billboards, a tote bag, pretty stock standard stuff. But what I've done is I've actually gone online to find a few just like t-shirt mock-ups. And I've also found some chopsticks and a little kind of like Chinese food, Asian food kind of takeaway noodle box. And then this one is a little bit more involved. I've actually done in Adobe Dimensions. So Dimensions allows you, allows you to kind of create some 3D things from preset stuff. So I haven't actually created any of this 3D. I'm hopeless with 3D. But yeah, these are all just kind of blank canvases waiting for me to kind of use my artwork to put on a mock-up. So I've left them purposefully blank here. Obviously, if you were presenting this, you would mock your work onto it. And so this is the bulk of the work that we've got, right? We've got a main kind of illustration and then some various kind of type elements for kind of different elements that we're going to use. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with maybe something relatively simple. I'm going to put my illustration on this t-shirt. Which is a nice kind of flat t-shirt. So it's pretty easy. Illustrator is going to be able to do that. But it'll be a bit more interesting when we get to this. And you'll see what's really cool about this new mock-up feature, right? So how do we do this? We're going to grab, I'm going to start with this guy. And I'm going to copy him over. So I want to keep these like flat versions on the side as well as like backups, right? I don't want to just keep reusing the same one that's been kind of warped. So I'm going to drag him down here. And I'm going to just pop him on top of my artwork right there. And I'm going to drag him onto this layer here into this group. And then stick him just above that image there, right? And then we're going to select 1 and 2. So we've got the illustration and the photograph. So this is just a JPEG that we've got there. And I'm going to go literally in this window here and hit mockup. If that's not open, you can either go to your window and find your mockup, which is in beta still, or you can just go to object and then you'll find a new thing down here that says mockup make. But because we've got our window open, I'm just going to hit make. And what it's going to do is it's going to use AI to kind of generate a mesh, put things in perspective and stick that down. So you can see how that's happened just then. It's just kind of put it in perspective. And it's also clipped it, so it's cropped it so that it's not in the image when it goes outside of it, right? And I can still resize this, and I can still angle it and reposition it a little bit. So I'm going to re-angle this a little bit, make sure it's in perspective. And what's really nice about this is as I move this around, you can see it's still getting a bit warped. And like, it's using AI, so it's kind of like generating based on the shapes that are there. It's kind of trying to simulate what this would look like if it was on the actual t-shirt, right? Which is pretty cool.
Absolutely, yeah. I've never seen this before yet because this has just come out, right?
This has just come out, yeah. And so you know, if I'm going to drag this onto the floor here, it's going to try and sort of mock it up there. It will wrap it around this box or this can, and you can see it's like clipping as it goes. So it's pretty powerful and it's a pretty cool thing to have. Where almost what you would be doing normally if you were designing is you would design all these, put them in a template in Photoshop, and then like save it, and then if there's an edit, you got to redo that whole process again. Whereas with this, it's literally just like, hey, what about this? You could literally sit there with your client and design it as you go.
Incredible.
Right?
Yeah, chat agrees. Alan and Kylie Rose, some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Epic, even. And I don't know if you saw, but my jaw is on the floor, especially when you started moving it around. That is really impressive.
It's pretty cool. And again, yeah, we can start to put a whole bunch of different things in here as well and see kind of how that works with it. So we're going to try and grab this guy and stick him into here.
And Shivani, yes, this is Adobe Illustrator, so the latest version of Adobe Illustrator. But this image here with the red background was created in Adobe Dimensions. So
yes, that's correct.
There you go.
But you could just grab anything from online, or if you've got like a an iStock or an Envato, any of those kind of things where you can download mockups, you can just grab anything that you want and kind of stick it onto that as well. So let me put that one over here and do the same thing. It should just allow me to drag it into an image over here, but let's see if that works. It's not doing it, but that's all right. I might just do a different one just while we got time.
And Jennifer here, so wow, I'm flabbergasted, which yes, I am as well.
It's pretty cool. So let's put this one here onto a different one again. Grab this guy, put him onto this t-shirt down here. And you'll see again how this works and what we can do with this and kind of how that's going to affect our whole presentation that we kind of put together. So I'm going to put him over here, drag him there, and then do the same thing, select both of them and hit mockup. And it's going to try and generate that mesh.
It's going to blow my mind again. There you go.
Yeah.
Mine
and
is
so
blown.
you can see, even like on a black t-shirt, it's finding the folds of the t-shirt. Like it'll go on his arm a little bit.
Yeah.
A
Oh,
bit
you
funny,
could do
but
great tattoo mock-ups
you could
for
do
this.
tattoo mock-ups, absolutely.
My goodness.
The only caveat to this is it needs to be a vector file. So you need to have your artwork vectorized in order to do this. But yeah, you can see it's kind of warping this to the image. If I move it onto the other one on the back, it'll be a little bit more kind of straight up, right? So again, like we can really start to mess around and see kind of how we're going to put all this work together, where we're going to put everything, and kind of make our presentation and our work shine a little bit more, right? So we've got all this work, but then we can show like this is how it would look on a t-shirt. This is how it would look in a different version of potentially. So we've got this one as well, and we can, same process again, that we're going to copy this down, drag it onto our layers here, and then move him down.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. I think I know my weekend is just going to be me drawing tattoos and then sticking them all over.
Yep.
It's going to be a great time.
So there we go. And then it kind of sticks it on there. So what we can do now is, next step to make it a little bit more realistic still, is we can go into our appearances panel and put this on a multiply, and we can start to see a little bit of that effect come through.
Yeah, texturize it a little bit.
Yeah. I'm in the wrong panel. Here we go. Opacity, multiply. And you can see now that kind of t-shirt has come through. We can really make it look like it's sitting on that t-shirt. And then again, we can move it around, rescale it, add takeaway onto this a little bit. And if it's not quite the right perspective, if the AI mesh hasn't, you can still kind of edit that to your liking a little bit more. Right?
Amazing.
So that's the nuts and bolts of that feature. And again, the really cool thing about this is like you move it around and it'll still kind of do it live. But the other thing I wanted to kind of chat about in terms of doing this and why you would do this again is because what, again, you're trying to achieve here is, here's all the uses of this artwork. Here's how we can kind of create something more from just a few like bits of illustration and some simple type that we've done. Again, I'm not like a branding designer, I'm not a logo designer, so don't judge these too harshly. I've kind of thrown this together pretty quickly, but the point is we can make this look really a lot more amazing than it has any right to be by doing these mock-ups, right? And by creating this kind of project where we're going to start to see all these kind of pieces of packaging come together and make it look like it's all kind of real and live.
It's in universe.
Yeah. And then that's what I mean by kind of context, right? This is now a brief. The mock-ups that I've chosen are also not like innocent. I've got chopsticks, I've got the kind of the takeaway noodle packaging. That's something that you can definitely think of when you're doing this is not every mock-up is built equal.
Exactly, and we were talking about it just before we went live, and the question of, can you have too many mock-ups?
Yes, you can, definitely. You can have, like, there's this tendency, I think, with a lot of people kind of doing these projects of, like, put it on a water bottle, put it on a hat, put it on tote bags. Yeah. It's like, does this brief really require a tote bag? Like, business cards for restaurants, yes, for sure. Tote bags for restaurants, maybe not. Definitely, like, envelopes, like, yeah, that looks really cool on an envelope, but a restaurant with, like, maybe seems a bit weird. But beyond that as well is, if you can kind of, like, if you can find a mock-up of a, like, ramen bowl and some sushi and, like, put that into your mock-up as well, give it a little bit more context.
Absolutely.
All that's going to bring your brand to life and make it look very real and very fleshed out. And that's what I mean by kind of, like, choose your mock-ups appropriately and adequately. Like, I've chosen these because there's a little bit of perspective and some folds in to kind of highlight this particular feature. But really, if it was me, like, doing this, if it was a live project, you'd probably go out and take your own photos and get some neon lit stuff and some anime things because it's me. But that would just kind of give a little bit more life to these mock-ups and make them look like they're not just like mock-up random A from internet. Here you go, use your imagination. So yeah. And then the last and kind of final thing that I wanted to chat about with this is not so much centered around the mock-up, but it's this slide here. And I get a lot of questions from my students regarding, like, should I put in sketches? Should I show my work? And kind of, how many do I put in? Do I put them all in? And I think, yes, like we talked about with mock-up, you can have kind of too many mock-ups.
Yes.
You can definitely show too many sketches. Like, I think the key here is to make sure that your sketches are relatively in line with what you're finally trying to present to your client, right? If I've got a whole bunch of stuff here that's like Mexican themed, like, there might be cool sketches, but that's really going to be quite confusing on this particular page.
Because you can't see where the narrative of how you created this thing, how it came to life,
exactly.
sort of the through line is blurred by doing that.
Yeah, and it creates confusion, exactly as you said. It's just like, well, what's this Mexican concepts coming in here? I thought this was a Japanese restaurant. So that can be a little bit confusing. So yeah, too many mock-ups definitely is a thing, and too many varied mock-ups. But too little, I think, can also kind of showcase what you're not necessarily doing. And I think the key factor is, what are you trying to achieve by showing this? Are you trying to showcase to your client that you did all this work? Or are you trying to show them, like, I also explored this and I explored all this kind of stuff? For me, the main thing with this is it shows your work. And that is, like, a little bit like when you're sitting a math exam. The teachers will always ask you, like, show your reasoning, right? Don't just show me that you guessed the answer. And there's a lot of value that can be driven from this, from, like, an art director or creative looking at this and going, like, I can see where your mind went with this. The last thing with this is also, as an illustrator, one of the benefits of that is people find illustrations super cool, generally speaking, especially those who can't really draw themselves. And if I'm being kind of called in on a job to work with an agency or an art director, it's usually because they don't have somebody who can draw. And so showing these kind of final digital things can be a little bit of a kind of a far cry from drawing, right? Because it's pen tool, because it's shapes, because it's graphic design. I think people forget that there's still kind of drawing and creativity that goes into this.
There's a human being behind the pixels.
Yeah, totally. And so showing this, like, I get comments from clients when I show them my sketches, like, oh, you're actually, like, drawing these things first. And, like, yeah, I'm doing it digitally, but it's still a drawing. And I think reminding your client of that has a huge amount of value in terms of, like, putting your work in, like, on its best foot forward.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? It's not just like a digital thing. Now you've got this piece that I crafted. Look how I crafted it. There's a person behind it. It's a drawing. And then look how this rolls out to all these kind of different things that we can do with this. Can be super, super cool. And it can just pad out your portfolio with a lot more work.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's a neat little feature that just like lets you just do it live on top of it and just make this process a little bit more smooth.
Absolutely. I think we did get a few questions. I didn't want to interrupt, but we did get a few technical questions as we were going through, and I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. What about using this platform for patterns or mock-ups of clothing or furniture? Have you tried pattern stuff?
I haven't, but I can't imagine why that wouldn't work, because it's effectively just taking your AI file and wrapping it through an AI mesh to something like this. So I assume you could do like a print pattern and put it on this T-shirt and it would work relatively well.
Yeah.
Something to try for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, you might have to break it down into sections for the sleeves or the main part, but that could absolutely work. That's a great idea.
The only thing that I've noticed with this in the little time that I've spent with this is that everything needs to be on the same layer. So if you've got different layers, the mesh will kind of lose its concentration and not be able to mesh it all from separate layers. So you do need to either group them all on the same layer or or combine them all together.
There you go. And let's see here. Of course, we can rotate the logo after you placed it into a mock-up. You can skew it and adjust it. Can you use 3D in those mock-ups?
I have not tested that.
Not tested it. We shall see. It's worth experimenting with. And I did see a question a while ago that I do think would be lovely to end on. And that is, how did you decide to become a freelance illustrator?
Oh, that is a good question. I wish we had an extra half hour. Basically, I studied animation to begin with. I was fascinated with just drawing animation. And then I did a year of animation school, and then I kind of thought, like, I'd actually like to explore graphic design, a whole bunch of different kind of things. Did a 5-year course in graphic design. Graduated, started working in branding, graphic design, did that for 6 months before I realized, actually, I think I only really like doing the illustration components of graphic design. And so I kind of, just decided I want to be an illustrator. And for better or for worse, I think illustration is, nowadays, strictly speaking, a freelance job. There are a few kind of agencies where they have kind of in-house illustrators, but because every job is so different, it's kind of tricky to have somebody like that on hand who's going to be able to do all the things. So generally speaking, it's like we need this and we need that. So let's go to this person, let's go to that person. So I get a lot, as you can imagine, I get a lot of kind of this type of work for like Japanese bars, restaurants, anime themed work, all this kind of stuff, which is just fine by me. Bring it on.
Yeah, oh, you love that. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us, Jeremy.
It's been a pleasure.
That brings us to an end of day 1 of Adobe Live APAC, not Adobe Live, Adobe MAX, of course, here in Australia. And sit tight, because we'll be back tomorrow with Chris Hansen and Christina Ryan talking all things Premiere Pro and 3D. So don't stray too far. Come back tomorrow and we'll see you then. Bye.